You'll need something sharp. I like this tool. This does not come with your kit. You can buy them at Trinity. They're pretty inexpensive, but any knife or something like this, or even like a needle tool, which does come with everyone's kit. It's that long pointy tool, and everyone also has something like this, a serrated rib. So you'll need something that can scratch the clay, okay? Different ribs. So I have a metal rib here. I have a rubber rib. Everyone also has a metal rib. This is another tool that's useful. Some kind of knife, something to cut clay with. Okay, and then these are just some other various tools that I have. This is just like your wooden knife tool, a tool for drawing. You'll need something like this at the beginning, and then maybe a little bit later. These are just paddles. So these live underneath this table here. Okay, this is my personal one that I keep over on another table, but people are welcome to use it. Just put it back over there, okay? You'll need newspaper for the very beginning. Does anyone know where this is at? In the glaze room, if you're looking at the sink, right to the left, underneath the countertop, there's a big container with newspaper. So you'll need a little bit of this just at the beginning, and then you'll need a board to build your piece on. So these stay underneath here. We have enough to get started for now. We also have all of these turntables, which are just like the wheel, but they're not motorized, right? It helps you whether you're making something symmetrical or not. But these all stay right underneath here. Now just know that these come apart in two pieces. So if you go to lift this metal one, the top's gonna fall off. And it's loud when it falls. Okay, it's not a big deal if it falls, it's just gonna like scare you. So know that you need to pick it up from down here if you're using it, okay? So I think what we're gonna try, anyone have questions about that? Just basic tools mostly. You don't need water as much. We're not sort of working with friction or trying to avoid friction in the same way as with throwing. Same basic principles. Rules are to make something even, over thin or thick, even, but we're shooting for something about 1/4 of an inch thick the whole way. And other than that, what we want to do is be sure our clay sticks together really well so that you don't get cracks in the end. What's going to happen with these projects is everyone's going to get to some point where you've built your piece, and just like your bowls, when they're really wide and they're wet, it wants to fall. So you can only build so far, and you let the clay dry a little bit, and then you come back and you add more clay on top. So it becomes more structural, then you can keep building. So that's the kind of working pattern. Build until it's going almost to collapse, let it dry, come back the next day or later, put more clay on, keep going, okay? So that means that there probably will be a little bit of downtime. You get to here, you need to wait till next class. You can work on the first project, make more bowls, glaze, that kind of thing in between, okay? So I think what we're going to do today, and if it doesn't work, I'll give a more sort of definitive explanation too. But what I want you all to do is just like direct me on what to build once I get this ready. Say like, build it up, build it out. And I just want to show you rather than telling you how it is that I use it, and then ask questions like, how are you making it go out, that sort of thing. And so we'll go through it that way to be sure that I am answering any of the questions that you have, and it's a different kind of engagement, a very like visual learning thing. And if that's not working, or if you feel like you're still really confused, I'll just verbally explain everything too, okay? But I'm gonna get it started, and then you can tell me how to build it. So, or the direction of the form. Need a little bit of clay. We're not really worried about air bubbles at all, so you don't need to wet your clay, okay? Well, we do want it to be homogeneous in that there's not a hard spot and a soft spot, but air is not a big deal. So I have a little bit of clay, and I need to flatten it out, so I'm gonna make my bottom first, the very bottom of the piece. Anytime I'm doing this, I'm starting from the middle and moving out in all directions. Anytime I'm trying to thin clay out. There are rolling pins underneath here. You can roll it out. If you're going to use this, just as a general good practice, you don't do this, because then you get a very thin edge. You come to the edge and lift up, okay? Same thing, middle out, all directions, both sides. This is a way to make a slab. The other thing that's important for this big piece, clay doesn't like to be flat, doesn't like it that much, so compression is super important. And that's where these come in at the beginning. So, this is also really useful to help compress it, okay? If you're starting with a big lump of clay like this, you can use the side to come across, okay? Later on in the process, you can use this to help smack it into place, but it needs to be a little drier first. If you don't put fabric between, it wants to stick. So this is your release, okay? So we need compression and we need evenness. How thick did I say we needed it to be? Quarter inch or so. So this is still a little bit thick, right? It's close, but. So I could keep rolling it out, just make it thinner that way. I'm also going to show you something else that's called throwing a slab. So you get it pretty even, pretty flat, pick it up on the opposite side of where you're standing, and you're going to flip it over and pull it back towards yourself. Just like that. What's happening here is it's hitting, slowing down because it's colliding here with the table. Momentum is pulling it forward and stretching it. So this is a really easy way to make a big slab.
Fascinating how much of an impact that has.
It's so fast, so easy. And this is how I make all of my slabs. I almost never personally, like in my own work or anything else, use the slab roller. This is so quick. Everyone here is gonna need like a piece of clay like this big in the end, basically like a pancake. You can kind of just like smack it out in your hands and make it flat as a starting point. So I think the slab roller is really it's overkill, it's over-engineered for like what we're doing right now. That being said, if you want to learn how to use a slab roller, I can show you how to do that. So for my starting piece, I might grab something round and use it as a template so I can get a mark. I could also, sometimes I just make a point, like make a little mark in the middle, and then do my best. Let's say, I think I should actually make this a little smaller. So I do my best to stay consistent and just hold my fingers and make a little mark. You could also use a tool to measure. So I put the middle of the knife right in what's gonna be the center of my circle and then hold my finger at a certain spot. And so I can go around now. And give myself close marks, and then I can connect those, right, to get very close to a circle. And I'm gonna show you that it doesn't actually, it's okay if it's not super circular at the beginning. I'm gonna show you how to make it circular here in a minute. So whenever you're making these things, it's always so much easier, even when you're coil building, to have more clay than you think you need. The name of the game here is going to be to get the material close to being in place while it's wet, and then after it starts to get a little bit more dry, come back and refine the shape. If you try and get it to its final form right when it's wet, you're going to spend way too much time getting like this high, and then probably have to come back and fix it later anyways. So it's get the material close, when it's stiffer, refine from there. Okay, got my board. The reason we use newspaper at first, and you just need a little bit, and later when the piece is more dry, we'll actually be able to take it off, is to help prevent it from sticking to the wood, especially if there's a lot of weight. So this is usually you can put this over an edge here and just get it to tear pretty evenly. Right, so this is more than enough for the size that I'm working on. Just one like that. So we don't need to use a lot of newspaper. Okay, now I want you all to tell me what direction, what shape I should build. And then I'm gonna start building, and you can just ask questions about what I'm doing as I'm doing it. So what way should it go first?
Let's go up first.
Go up, that's good.
Give us a little verticality.
Yeah, we definitely do need to move up, I think that's right. If I was a student, I would maybe be asking me to build a shape similar to the one that I was planning on building. So, does anyone have an idea of what shape they're building? Okay. What is it?
Pot.
A pot? Yes. Should I go out, straight up, slight angle?
This one?
Okay, so out pretty far.
Yeah.
Okay. For the sake of the demo, I'm not going to go out as far, but you know what? I'll show you why first. So let's say that your piece starts quite small and gets wide really, really quickly. So we need clay. We need to make a coil. Right? Has anyone made a coil before? Okay, so just watch me do this.
Very similar to do the bread, the dough.
The dough, yeah, it's kind of this doesn't like it doesn't bread dough like wants to like go back, you know, to the same shape. But so how is it that you do the bread dough? What's the trick to doing bread dough?
But you cannot push too much pressure. You have to be gentle.
Mm-hmm.
But this one is hot, so you can
A little bit more
a little
pressure.
bit more pressure. And you need to like a rolling and shape it. But the dough will shrink back.
Yeah,
this
the dough
one-
wants to
yeah.
go back. This won't do that. But you're right in saying that actually this takes a lot less pressure than I think people use initially. Too much pressure.
Because the notions
Yeah, and this kind of thing happens. So there was one other thing that was really important to what I was doing there. Did anyone notice where I started at? Start with piece.
And then make it like longer.
Uh-huh.
And then do roll.
Rolling. And when you roll from the middle out, just like the slab, middle out. Just like when I made this, middle out, flipped it over, middle out. So middle out, you're trying to distribute. The other big thing here is it's going to be a lot easier if your coil looks more like this, pretty even in diameter the whole way through, versus something like this. Is this possible? Absolutely. Like it's not that big of a deal. But remember when I was teaching throwing, I said throw it down in the center and then smack it to get it close before you ever even turn the wheel on? Getting these things close here is going to be less work later. This is plenty close though, it doesn't need to be perfect.
and we're scoring like everywhere that it's going to touch. Is that the idea?
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of slipping and scoring, whenever you're putting clay together, everyone saw me do this a second ago, and I added some water and did it again. You can make slip on clay just by adding water and scoring. Another little trick, we have some slip up there in those containers, but if you can't get them open, because they're really hard, you can spray water directly on, or you can make a pinch pot actually and add water and just start scoring the inside.
Tiny scoring palette.
Yeah, add a little more water, and then you just make a little temporary pot with slip that you can take out and put on. So this works too. Okay, so we're going out. Everyone watch my hands. And where I'm working. Okay. So one coil done. Now let's say you have a little bit of another coil left over. I'm gonna put it on.
So the second one, you don't need to switch.
It's a, yeah, good question. Yeah, so good observation. So the truth is clay sticks together through mediating water between two pieces of clay that are different moisture contents, stiffer and more wet, or compression. So clay like this probably won't stick together. It might stick together through the firing, and then later you're going to be able to knock it off. It's not that hard, but not that much pressure. Clay like this will stick together, and you will not be able to pull it apart. So compression plus slipping and scoring is your friend. So if the clay is the same moisture content, as long as I compress really, really well, I don't have to slip and score. But if you're concerned at all that one bit is drier than the rest, you should slip and score, because it is a pain to make your whole piece and then later get this little crack all the way around where it wasn't attached well together. When would you need to, so knowing that, at what point in the project do you think you would be slipping and scoring?
Be what?
Be slipping and scoring.
Leather harder.
Like leather harder. Yeah. So say that you build some today, you wrap it up, you come back Wednesday, it's a little more dry. You wouldn't just put clay on, you would slip and score to start with. Okay. So something else has happened here, right? I'm only halfway around. But that's okay. Make another coil. See what I'm doing here? I'm overlapping. I didn't do this. On top, coming all the way around. I'm gonna try and do this way so you all can see. Do you see what I'm doing with my thumb? Okay. And what I usually do on the outside, I do it with my finger too at the same time. Okay, got another That second coil wasn't quite long enough, so I need a little bit more clay. As long as I really compress, so I'm gonna spend a minute here really compressing this together, we'll be okay. So I have material on. Now I just need to put the material into the areas or into the shape that we want, right? So I'm gonna come back to pinching. We're making a big pinch pot in sections. So down at the bottom, pinching and pushing up. Just like when I throw, I don't go over the edge of the rim. Does everyone see that shadow that's happening there? That's my thumb coming right up to the inside. And right now what I'm doing is paying most attention to the inside shape. So when I make another coil, everyone watch. Coil shape roughly, in the middle, rotate. The middle, rotate, and up towards the end. Flip it over, middle, rotate. I'm just rotating a little bit with my other hand here. This is the way that I do it, because I'm really close to having a nice coil, right? And now I just need to make it a little bit thinner. how am I making it go out?
Until it falls.
It will fall. I'm actually gonna, that's what I'm gonna do here. I'm gonna go until it falls so you can all see this fall so you'll know. But how do I direct the material? Like think about going to the wheel. Like how am I making it go out? Why is it not going up? Why is it not going in? Why is it not going flat? Like I'm controlling that. How am I doing that?
Because you're pushing more outward.
I'm pushing out.
Like wire compressing.
Yeah, so I'm compressing at the same time. How do we go from, what happens when we go from a smaller diameter to a larger diameter? At least in the scenario of the bowls. What happened when you threw your bowl like this and it started trying to stretch it? Wanted to fall down? What about the wall thickness?
It got thinner?
It got thinner. Same principle here. We're adding material, but then we have this set amount of material. So I can start to make it go out by pointing that direction, but I'm also with the knowledge that it's getting thinner as I do that too. So I'm thinning it out in a particular direction. I'm not just moving clay in a direction. It's getting thinner as it changes direction.
So that's why you use like really thick coils? Because you knew it was going to get really
Exactly. So some people who have coil built before may have learned you extrude coils and you kind of like stack them on top of each other like Legos. And that does work. The way that I'm showing you now, I think is maybe, if you can understand that you can stack clay in a direction, just like Legos, and build it out, then this will make sense. It might be slightly more complex, but I'm starting with thicker material so that I have enough material to thin it out into whatever shape I want. And this really gives me a little bit more nuanced control. I'm not bound by the thickness of the coils that I'm stacking to make a curve. I can make a really steep curve or something like that. So this gives me, it's more like drawing. You can just draw things out by like pinching and moving. So we have a rough shape, right? Kind of looks like a pot, a little bit, as a start. What's happening here? It's a little bit too wide, right? Or a little bit too tall. Maybe my coil is thicker on this side. Just like when you're throwing and it gets off center and it's thicker on one side, it gets taller if you're making it even. So I need to do something here, all right? I either need to get it to match this side. Well, really I need to get it to match this side if I want it to be symmetrical. So what are some ways that I could do that? Cut, I'm holding this, yeah. I could cut it off, but I'm gonna try and show you a way to keep that material and redirect it. So if your bowl is like this and you stretch it and it gets thinner, what happens when we go back the other way?
It gets thicker.
It has to get thicker. It's the only way. Think about this as your pot. If we want to make this, or a brown paper bag, if we want to make the brown paper bag not as wide, we start squeezing it in. What's happening here? It's wrinkling, it's folding. We don't really want our clay to do that, right? We don't, and it's okay if it does. I can show you how to fix that. But to make clay go in, so that it's not as wide, what we want to do is actually push it together. So I'm gonna push this into itself. That makes it a little bit thicker. Does that make sense? Into itself. And it's still wanting to do some wrinkling, but now it's getting thicker and it's standing up straighter. So I can keep doing that. And I know that it's gotten thicker now, so I need to come back and thin it out, and I can redirect it. Right, we're at a similar vault. If this was much further along, I could keep coming up. You can also cut it off, but this knowledge that as it gets wider, I'm also making it thinner, and if I need it to come in, because I've gone too wide, you can turn and push it together to make it thicker. So now I'm gonna direct myself a little bit here. I'm gonna come in and then up. So I've gone out, pushing together. See how it's getting thicker here? I'm kind of wrinkling just a little bit. Nice shape. Thanks. So I'll show everyone how to refine the shape a little bit more in a second, but remember that what I said earlier, get the material in place quicker. Don't spend all of your time trying to make a finished surface right off the bat, because it won't happen as easily. And just like the wheel, we spend a lot of time looking down on it, and it's hard to see. So, like from this angle, I'm really just looking at these contours. They're pretty close. This side's a little different, so I think that this needs to come in slightly more. And I will come around and check as I'm working. This side's off a little bit now. It looks like a pumpkin, doesn't it? Yeah. So everyone's piece will also need to have some kind of texture. Not because it's part of the assignment, because it's impossible to avoid. Everything here is a texture, right? Smoothness is as much as a texture as something that's rough or has fingerprints or anything else. So we just need to be thinking about that. And I'm okay with your piece being very pinchy, having lots of hand marks. My advice would be to do it with a lot of purpose. So really be squeezing and leaving. And I'm going to show you how to make smooth things in a second here. So I'm definitely watching for collapse because I'm on the verge of it. And that's okay for the dippo. But for all of you, you might want to you'll get to a point to where it does need to set up. And that's I'm getting close to that. This could be a day. If you got this much material done on your piece, whatever this is, 4.5 inches or 4 inches, what is that? That's a fifth of the way through your piece, right? Some of your pieces are very wide, so it'll be much bigger than this initially. But that took me, what time is it? I don't know. That took me 25 minutes or something, right? So it doesn't have to take a long time. So I got the material on. I want to come in, right? We're going to come in and then up. So to do that, pushing together and in. So it has collapsed here on this side. See how it's falling a little bit. So this would be the stopping point. I'm going to try and see if I can, I'm just going to keep going. If it falls, it's okay. When you roll a coil, it's good to go all the way from fingertips to the back of your palm. I'm overlapping a little bit where the two ends meet, so I have lots of opportunity for compression. So what happens if you want to have negative space right in the middle of your piece? I would start by doing something like this. And this would be a point at which you would wait. You'd get it started, and then we'd wait for this area to dry a little bit, because this is going to want to fall. That being said, I'm going to try. We're going to push it and see how far we can get here. So this side's not sticking out quite as far as this side. It's limited by this in the middle. To make this wider, what do I need to do to this? It needs to get thinner, right? It's the only way that it gets wider too. So I need to thin that side out. And let's see if we can avoid this collapse just for a moment. But at this point, you would now be able to let it sit up, slip and score, and then independently build these in whatever direction. They don't have to be symmetrical anymore. Another way of doing that is to let it get dry and then to come back and cut out a circle in whatever spot or whatever shape, doesn't have to be a circle, to add a coil of clay and start building it off this way. So one way you can kind of think about coil building is a little bit like a 3D printer, in that you're printing a coil, it's moving to a new spot, printing a coil. But the reality is that you don't have to be building all of it at one time, symmetrically. I could just build half of it if I wanted to. And the reason that's important is because some of you might have pieces where the vault of the work is happening at different angles. So in other words, this could be coming up very gradually, and this side could be coming out really steeply. Like how would you make the letter P out of clay, right? One side has to come out much further, meaning that you'd be able to build this side much faster up, this side slower while it's drying, and then get it to catch up. And you don't even have to add a coil of clay all the way around. So I could just work on one side of it. It's a thin spot here, so I want to be sure I get that. So if this starts to happen, you know that you need to stop, right? We've lost it on this side completely. So this is it's too heavy for how steep this was and how wet the clay was. If this was a much softer curve, we could have gone further. So I'm going to cut this off. Set it to the side temporarily. Set this to the side. I'm going to keep going here just to show you. and does everyone see where this is going? I could keep building this off this direction, and this could start coming up straight. So now they're no longer bound by the kind of exacting symmetry, because they can also be moving not just this direction, but these directions, right? So I'm gonna come back to my other one now, and actually, I'm gonna do one more quickly, because I wanna show how to make things square and how to make things smooth. Whenever you slip and score, which I'm not doing a whole lot of because this clay is all wet, be sure this tool doesn't work great for slipping and scoring, only if the clay is very wet. It's not very deep. If you're coming back and it's dry, you want something to look much more like that. Okay? This versus that. To glue things together. Yeah, roughing the surface up, or if you're trying to paint like a old cabinet or something, you need something for the new material to stick to. Whenever I'm making something that's square, I don't like to start my coils on the corners because I know that this is the spot where it's most likely to crack, is here. So I start in the middle of a larger plane. And then I come around the corner and I leave extra clay in the corner. Just because something is square or geometric doesn't mean that it can't be moving in other directions. So I'm actually going to try and make this square and get smaller as it comes up. The one thing I'm doing is being sure to leave a little bit of extra clay in my corners. And I'm really compressing it together. Can you see that I'm pushing the clay together? I'm not just pinching it to get thinner. And I'm just using my hands to rough in the idea of where those corners are going to be. So this one ended right in the corner. It's not the end of the world, but I just try and avoid it. Add a little bit more clay here. I'm gonna try and bring the shape back out the other direction now. So rather than putting this coil directly on top, I'm actually going to put it on the outside just a little bit. It's kind of, what do we call that? Like catty corner. Okay, so it's roughly square, roughly coming in and then coming out just a little bit. I don't always, you don't have to cut the edge or anything like this to start. Sometimes it is easier to see what your shape looks like if the edge is a little bit cleaner. Because if one side's longer, it's hard to know if you're really following the same vault. If you want it to be symmetrical, it can be hard to imagine. So this can help me check a little bit. And like this corner is not quite as steep as this one, and it's moving much more in this direction rather than out towards me at an angle. So I can come back and fix that now. And I'm just pushing out, making it thinner if it needs to get out wider. And that's why I leave this a little bit thicker than my finished thickness so that I have an opportunity to come back and alter. So if you wanted your piece to have this pinchy texture, I'm completely fine with this. You just don't want to do this and then come back and start altering it too much. If it's just going to be the making process, just make it and leave it. But maybe some of you want it to be smoother. That's where this tool comes in, and it's really, really important. So to make things smooth in clay and to shape things, you actually need to make it rough first. So we have like different types of smoothness. We have a smoothness in terms of a shine, right? Is it shiny? Is it matte? And we also have a smoothness in terms of its topography. Is it flat or is it undulating, like with fingerprints? And they're pretty interrelated. So if you want something to be really shiny, it's often much easier to achieve that if the surface is also flat. Because what makes something shine is like a more uniform reflection of light, I'm pretty sure. So all of the little bits that sit low kind of have shadow, makes it appear less smooth. And so what this tool also does is reveals high and low spots. So as I'm scraping here, see the scrape marks, and then when there's no scrape marks, like right in that little bit right there, am I pointing at the right spot? Yeah. Does everyone see that? That means it's a low point, right? So either I need to keep scraping back until I've gotten to my lowest point, and I have even scraping across the whole thing, or like that, or I need to push out and scrape, a combination of those things. It's a little hard for me to do this because this is so small right now. But when you're using this tool, it's much easier to get things flat if you don't move it perpendicular to your coils. So if the coils are stacked this direction, coil, 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 if you move it straight up and down, perpendicular to that, it moves up and it hits the low point, keeps going, hits the low point, and you end up making little divots from your coils. So it's a lot easier to actually come across it at an angle like this. And this is kind of a cool texture, just on its own, right? So we're roughed in, it's a little bit more uniform, it's a little bit more smooth. Could leave it there. And for all of you who are working not in the demonstration mode, this is an okay stopping point. As long as it stays, as long as it doesn't get past like soft leather hard, to come back and do the next part. To get things super smooth, you can't get them incredibly smooth when it's all wet like this. You have to get it close, let it stiffen up, and come back and keep making it more smooth. That's how, like this pot, these Pueblo pots that are up here that get really, really shiny, it's through burnishing, and it's through burnishing them with a little bit, prepping the surface when it's soft like this, and then burnishing as they're hard leather hard all the way into bone dry. They're just burnished and burnished, okay?
Is that with like some kind of steel wool type equivalent, like in terms of not
Like,
wool literally?
yeah, but like a 00 steel wool or something. That could be good. Historically, it's been done with very smooth eroded rocks,
Okay.
pieces of glass, bone, things that have a really like impermeable, very flat, uniform surface. Things that themselves are polished. So that's where these two tools come in. Everyone has this one. Remember, these are flexible. That's important. Or a rubber one, which maybe some of you have. So now you can come back, and my hand's on the inside and I'm supporting it. And it's much, much closer to being smooth, right? This would be a great surface, a great stopping point until it was stiffer, to come back with something even softer, like this or a rock, which I do have like a soft rock, a smooth rock if someone wants to try that, to get things really smooth. What I'm also doing here is with my corners, they're round on the inside, a little bit round. Does everyone see that? There's a little bit of extra material there. I was sure to compress it as much as I could. But the outside I'm holding out, and now I can use this tool also to try and get a really sharp corner, if I want a sharp corner. And of course, this texture does not have to be, I could have done this on the last thing that I was making too. Like, it happens on round things as well. It's not just something that's geometric, it's the same way. Use the rough tool first to fill the low spots and scrape down the high spots, and then come back with a much smoother tool to try and get definitive shifts. So it's really enticing, even for me, to like keep going with this. And maybe there's a little bit more work that could be done, but after a certain point, you're kind of wasting your time. Okay, this is plenty good to come back and make it more smooth later. This is setting myself up for it. The other thing that everyone's piece needs is that little shadow, which we've talked about a lot, right, with the bowls. So does anyone have questions?
How do you keep it for the next day?
Yeah, good question. We'll wrap it up the same way. So as much as possible, plastic stuck to the surface. So you don't want to soak it in water. If you put too much water and wrap it up too tight, it can fall. Like, it can collapse because it gets too wet. But a light spritz, can you hand me some plastic actually? Yeah, and this thinner plastic's better than thick plastic. I'll often put it over and then come back to the sides and get it like this. If I'm really worried, I'll put plastic underneath it too. And the other thing you can do is now spray the outside of this plastic and one more piece on top so that the water layer holds them together. And this will keep it really, really wet for a long time. So 2 pieces of plastic. The idea being the next day you come back, it's leather hard. This isn't going to collapse anymore, it's much stiffer. Slip and score, add clay on. If you're gonna make it smooth, then the new clay, make rough. Come back and smooth it. And then while that's drying now, passively, you can come back down here, then now that this is drier, start to smooth this out. So what ends up happening is you're putting material on, letting it dry, and then you're putting new material on, going to the form beneath it, refining it, moving up, new material, refine, new material, refine, new material, refine, and then finish the top, okay? So that's the kind of working method. If you're making handles, we'll make those separately, let them get leather hard, stick them on later. So does anyone have questions about that building process? Okay, so today the goal is to at least get a couple of inches up on your piece, okay?